Saturday afternoon. I know that we all live such busy lives, so I appreciate you all taking the time to be here today to join this My Culture Connect webinar. My name is Quentin Gooch. For those of you who I have not met, I am the program manager here at My Culture Connect, and I am so excited to bring you this information. Um, in this new world that we're living in post COVID, many of us are teaching online, or at least have some component of needing to present or to give information online. And it can be such a maze and web of how to connect these different presentation software, such as a Skype or Google Meet or Zoom, and then how to integrate those things with some of the other things that you might be presenting, like a Prezi presentation, like you're seeing with me today, or a Google slide or PowerPoint, or even a YouTube video. And so this webinar aims to help explain and kind of guide you through some of those and through some of those things. So first off, I think that most of you already are, but if you could just do me a small favor, make sure that when you hover over your little video square that you are muted, just to make sure that we don't have a lot of external sound throughout the presentation. But I think we're all good there. So let's go ahead and get started. We have a lot of information to cover. Okay, so what will we be talking about today? To start off, we're going to be talking about the applicable usage of the three most popular online teaching platforms, and those are going to be your Zoom, Google Meet, and Skype. Those are going to usually be the three most popular ones that most people use. I know there are some other ones out there, but those are going to be the most popular. So we're going to go over the applicable usage of those when integrating with other presentation software. Um, we're going to be talking about how to properly integrate your presentations with Zoom, Google Meet, and Skype. And so this would be things like we're going to specifically be talking about Prezi, Google Slides or PowerPoint, and then YouTube today, which again are some of the most popular platforms that most people are going to use to do presentations with. And hopefully, if you do use something else, some of the things that you learned today will be applicable to using those presentation software as well. And lastly, we'll also talk about some pros and cons of using these different platforms. In some cases, especially if you are independent and you're doing your own private tutoring or your own private teaching, you have a choice of which platforms to use. So I'm going to go through some of the pros and cons of what each of these platforms have, at least through my experience with teaching on these different platforms. And so some of these some of the things that I list as a pro may be a con for you or vice versa. But these are just going to be things through my experience that I to share with you. And then as you use these platforms, you can make your own decision on which ones you prefer. All right. So just a couple of housekeeping items and tips for watching and participating in this webinar. Number one, we are going to have Q&A after each demonstration. So please jot down your questions as the as the demonstrations are going on, and then you can feel free to ask your questions during that time. So I will allow after each demonstration, there will be some Q&A time. All right. Next, some of the demo videos have already been embedded in this presentation. So you can keep my video pinned, and which will make it bigger and better for you to see. So in Google Meet, you have the ability to pin. If you hover over any video square that you have the ability to push the little push pin. And when you do that, it makes that video become your main video screen. So for the most part, you can keep my traditional video that you're watching now as your pinned video because that's where most of the information will be. However, um, there are going to be some times when I'm going to have to share a video directly from YouTube. I was not able to embed every video into the presentation. And so if I do that, a new video square will appear, and you can then pin that new video square that's showing the YouTube presentation. You can then just switch your pin to that one so that that will be your main screen. So I will let you know if we're going to switch out and I'm going to share my screen to show you a video versus it just being embedded in the presentation so that you'll know kind of when you might want to switch your pins. But whatever you want to see the biggest and the best, make sure to pin it, and that will put it in the biggest screen here on Google Meet. And lastly, any links that are provided throughout this webinar in our Meet chat, please make sure to copy and paste those into your own document, into a notes or something. Make sure to go ahead and copy and paste those definitely before you leave or before this call is ended. One of the disadvantages of Google Meet is that once the call is ended, you no longer have access to the chat. Now, as the moderator of this or the leader of this presentation, I will get a transcript of the chat afterwards. But the easiest way to make sure that you have all of the links are just to copy and paste them before you leave or before this call ends. Also, when it comes to links, I will be providing a link to the Skype chat where I put the Google Meet information. I will be providing a link after this presentation. Probably won't be until tomorrow after this video produces. Google Meet takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to kind of produce a video of the meeting. Once that happens, I will be supplying you with a link that will include the recording of this video, and it will also include all of the supplemental YouTube videos that we will watch throughout this presentation. So if you missed something, do not worry. You will have access to it at a later time. Probably tomorrow, I'll be able to post that. All right. So now that we've taken care of that, let's get into the nitty gritty of why we are all here. How can we integrate these different presentations into whatever platform we're using? So we are going to start with the first, and that is going to be Prezi. And the reason we're starting here is because Prezi is the most difficult, but it is also the most dynamic, and it has really been a game changer when it comes to presentations. I know that many of us are used to Google Slides or PowerPoint, but Prezi really makes things so dynamic and visually pleasing by being able to change and zoom and do all these things. So Prezi is one of the presentation softwares that I get asked about the most, especially from a teaching perspective. And so that's where I want to start today. And also because it's the most difficult. So once you know how to integrate Prezi into these different platforms, everything else will be a piece of cake. And so that's why I wanted to start here. So before we get into exactly how we integrate Prezi into our different platforms, let's first talk about the difference between Prezi presentation and Prezi video. These are two different things. So with Prezi, you are allowed to both make presentations that would be similar to a Google Slides or a PowerPoint, but you can also record a video or a presentation within Prezi as well. And so, like right now, we're having this live webinar and I'm on video. I could have actually recorded this entire thing and just sent it to you in Prezi as well. So you can also use Prezi to make a video. Now, what gets a little bit confusing is because when you're using Prezi for an online class, you're going to actually build a presentation, but you're going to then use Prezi Video to overlay that presentation onto your video feed in the platform. And so, what that essentially means is that you need to use both Prezi Presentation and Prezi Video. All right. And so Prezi Video is something different that you will need to download onto your laptop or desktop computer. It is completely free and it's available in both the Macintosh and the Google Play or whatever app store you have for your laptop or PC. You will, though, need to download Prezi Video. And as we get into the demonstrations, I'll show you what that little icon looks like, at least for a Mac, because I am a Mac user. And so that is going to be step one, is that you will need to download Prezi Video. You can't just use the web application. All right. And lastly, for the purpose of this webinar, we are going to focus solely on integrating Prezi presentations with the various platforms like Google Meet, Skype, and Zoom. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to right now provide you a link to how to use Prezi Video overall. One of our great teachers, Emily Hogel, here at MCC, did a very great presentation on how to use Prezi. And it will teach you how to not only make Prezi presentations, but then how to present those as well. And so this is something I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat here. But as I said, later on, I will provide you with the link that will have all of these videos in it. So you can feel free to copy and paste this now to be safe, or you can wait for a little bit later. But this is the video that you will use to actually learn how to use Prezi, because I'm just going to show you how to integrate it. All right. So that's how the difference between Prezi presentation and Prezi Video. So let's get started now with the most difficult integration, and that will be Prezi integrating with Skype. So I feel like Prezi and Skype have a love-hate relationship with each other. They really don't want to be friends, but we force them to be friends for our purposes. And so with Skype, Skype integration with Prezi is the most difficult because it requires the most workarounds. You really have to do a lot of different things to make it work appropriately and to make it look the best for your class. And so we'll go over those tips and tricks of how to make it look the best and how to use it with Skype. But it's by far the most difficult and will take the most workarounds. So the first step, and this will be the first step of that we'll go through with each of these, but the first step is to ensure that your video settings in Skype are set to Prezi Video. We're going to go through exactly how to do this, but this will be the first step for all of the integrations we do. We're always going, well, with Prezi, we're always going to want to make sure that our Prezi Video is set in our platform. And so in order to set Prezi Video as your camera, you have to already have the Prezi Video app. So that is why I explained it's so important that that is your first step, to get the Prezi Video app. Next, you'll open the Prezi Video app and you will upload your presentation from the web application. So as I mentioned, Prezi has two things, a Prezi presentation and a Prezi Video. You are going to upload your presentation from the web application into the Prezi Video app. And that is what will allow you to overlay your presentation onto your video feed within Skype. Lastly, once your Prezi Video application is open and displaying, you will then share your Prezi Video window. Now, sharing the Prezi video window is something that you will only have to do in Skype, again, which is what makes Skype the most difficult, because that is one of the workarounds that I will explain in the demonstration. So, before we get to the actual demo, I thought it would be useful to tell you the tips and tricks first, because I'm going to show you how to do those tips and tricks when we get to the video or to the demo. So, first, let's talk about the tips and tricks. So, for Skype, one of the biggest tips that I have is that when you get to integrating your Prezi video, you want to make your Skype window as small as possible and make your Prezi video window as large as possible. One of the downsides to this is that it's going to make it more difficult for you to see your students, but your students will be able to see your presentation much better. The other tip that I have for you is that you'll be sharing your Prezi video window. It's very important. The reason why we need to share it is because of the way the audio functions work in Skype. If we don't share the video, whenever you have student participation, your presentation will disappear. So whomever is speaking takes over the video feed, and that includes your presentation. So one of the ways we work around that in Skype is to share our Prezi video. Instead of just overlaying it on our video, we're actually going to share our presentation, our Prezi video application. We're actually going to share that. So, all right. Those are the two biggest tips and tricks that I have for integrating Prezi with Skype. And so now we will get into the demonstration. For all of those, like I explained, some demonstrations will be directly from YouTube, others will be already embedded. This is one demonstration that we are going to watch directly on YouTube. So once I share my tab, go ahead and repin that presentation tab so that you can see it nice and big and clearly. Okay, so here we go. Okay, everyone. So now we're going to begin our first demo, which will be to integrate Prezi into Skype. This will by far be the most difficult demo that we will go through today and takes the most amount of workarounds to get it to work appropriately. So before we get started, everyone should already have Prezi Video downloaded on their device. You can see the icon here. This might look different if you have a PC, but this is the first step. You need to have already downloaded Prezi Video. As you can see here, I've already started a Skype call. And so if you haven't started a Skype call, you can get to the settings a little bit easier. But since I have one open, I'm going to have to do this. So once the first thing that you'll need to do is to make sure that your camera settings are appropriate to share a Prezi presentation. And how you'll do that is to go to these three dots that you see here, open your settings, and then go to audio and video settings. Now the audio and video settings are going to start with camera, and your camera should say Prezi Video Virtual Camera. Usually you have a built-in camera option and the Prezi option. So you will definitely want to choose the Prezi video camera option. This option will only be available if you have downloaded Prezi Video, which is why I said it's very important that this was the first thing you do. Once you have the Prezi Video Virtual Camera selected, that is the only setting that you will need to change in Skype before getting started. Next, we will go to our Prezi Video and open it. Now, you will see here that there are three options. I'm not going to discuss these first two. If you have a chance to watch the video provided by Emily Hogel where she explains how to use Prezi, she speaks a little bit about what these two options do. But we're only going to focus on importing from Prezi because most of you who have watched a presentation that we've done or a class that we've had or even this webinar that you're watching now are all presentations that were built using Prezi, the web application, and then we import them into Prezi Video. So I'm going to go ahead and use today's presentation as the example, and so I'll click on it and select Import Selected. And once I do that, you will see now that I have a window that includes my Prezi presentation and the video that you're seeing. Okay? Now, if you are able to see very small here in the Skype window, it will appear that things are flipped or that they're mirrored. Do not worry. Your audience is seeing your video how it appears here. So do not worry that on your Skype window it appears flipped. Now, the next very important step with using Skype is that we want to share our Prezi presentation video. So with Skype, when you're conducting a class, most of your students are going to have their Skype on speaker view. That allows them to see the video of whoever's talking. And as the teacher, you will do a lot of the talking, but we all have participation, or we should be having participation in our classes. And so if your students are using speaker mode, whenever one of them speaks or answers a question, guess what? Your presentation will disappear and they will no longer be able to see it. This can be problematic, especially if you're wanting a student to read something that may be on your presentation, or maybe you want to ask the student a question and you want them to actually see the question on your presentation. That is why it's very important that we need to share our window. So how we go about doing that is, once our call has been started, like here, we will go ahead and hit the three dots at the bottom and just click Share Screen. Now, Skype gives us two options, a desktop and a share window option. You are going to want to share the window. Now, for whatever reason, it always says untitled video, but the untitled video window is your Prezi presentation window. Once you share this, you will notice that the window is now outlined in red. This is going to show you that that you are sharing your Prezi presentation video. So that's how you confirm that it is being shared. Next, the other tip that I would give is that with Skype, the size of your window does matter. The smaller this window is, the smaller it appears to your audience on Skype. The larger this window is, the larger it appears to your audience on Skype. And so what I normally suggest is that you make your Skype window as small as possible, and you make your Prezi presentation video as large as possible to fill all of the void space that you can possibly fill on your computer to make this window as large as possible. This will allow the best viewing experience for your audience. And if you switch this, there's only two people on this call, so I won't be able to show you large grid view. But typically, if you're in a class where there are several people, you will have the option to do a large grid. And if you change this to large grid view, you will be able to see all of your students. Now, they will be in very small boxes, but you will be able to see all of your students who have their cameras on in these in large grid view. And so this is the best way that you can have the best user experience and also see your students. This will also prevent your video from being taken over during participation. So if a student starts speaking, since I'm sharing my screen, my presentation will remain no matter if they have their view on speaker mode or not. All right, so we will go ahead and take questions back in our regular presentation. Okay, everyone, welcome back to our regular presentation. And so I'll stop there and ask if anyone has any questions about what we just witnessed or went through. I know that went a little bit fast, but that's why I will supply all these videos later for you to rewatch. But any questions right now? Okay. Well, if you all don't have questions about that one, then I think the rest of this webinar will be a breeze because Skype is by far the hardest one that we will be integrating into. All of the other ones will seem like a piece of cake from here on out. So, all right. If you think of anything, you can always type it in our chat and I will address those, or you can wait until the end of the presentation because we will have a final Q&A once we get to the end. Okay, so we have now covered the most difficult. Now let's go to Prezi presentation integration with Google Meet, which will be a piece of cake. All right. So integration with Google Meet, which is what we're doing now, which is what I'm currently doing. It's very similar to Skype in the fact that you need to make sure that your camera and video settings are set to Prezi video. So again, for each of these, when you're using Prezi, you are always going to have to switch your camera from whatever your built-in camera is to the Prezi video camera. Next, for this one, you'll just open your Prezi video like before, upload your presentation. Now, for Google Meet, there is no screen sharing needed. Your audience will already see your screen and see your Prezi presentation, and it will not get taken over. Even if one of you unmuted right now and started talking, my video would still remain there, especially if you have me pinned. That's why on Google Meet, when we first started the webinar, I spoke about pinning the videos and which videos to pin at which times. That prevents it from being taken over by different speakers. And so Google Meet does not have that same issue that Skype has with the speaker view. And one tip is that as we're talking about pinning, you can have the students pin your video, which will make it, center and bigger and larger. So I know that if many of you who joined before 1 p.m. Eastern saw kind of like a screen holder or a screen page that just talked about the webinar and when it would begin. Usually I put something like that on my screen before my classes, and it just tells the students to pin my video once they come into class so that they can see it as large as possible. All right. So for this next demonstration, it is going to be another one that we're going to do directly from YouTube. So you will want to go ahead and switch your pin to the video that I share. Okay, everyone, our next demo is going to show us how we can integrate Prezi into a Google Meet. So as you can see, similar to our last presentation, I've already got a Google Meet open here. And so this is what it will typically look like. Now, the first thing that I do when I know that I'm going to be presenting a Prezi presentation is I go ahead and pin myself as the main screen. Many times we usually want our students to be on the main screen, but especially with Google and the fact that each participant will show up to the right here, I will still be able to see my students in smaller squares, even if I make myself the main picture. And I'll tell you why I do that in just a second. So after you do the first step of pinning yourself, which was just by, if you hover over any video, you can easily use the pin, which will then make you front and center, will make you the big one. So I can unpin myself and it'll change it, or I can pin myself and it'll make it big again. Okay, so now the rest of the steps are going to seem pretty similar. We're still going to go to our Prezi video app and open it. We are still going to import our presentation from Prezi. And I will still go ahead and use today's presentation as our example. So click and import selected. Once that happens, again, we appear. Again, you can always reframe yourself to make yourself look and be in the center of wherever you want to be. And now you've got yourself set up. If you take a look at your Google Meet, it is again going to look and appear as if everything is flipped. Don't worry, for your audience, they are seeing your screen appropriately. Now, the reason why I pinned myself as large and left my students small is because what I like to do is just resize my Prezi window so that it just covers my screen here. And so instead of seeing the flipped version of myself, I see the true version. And I can also then control my presentation directly from here while still seeing my students in the corner here. Um, and you can still zoom into the information and know that your students are seeing the zoomed information. And so that is why I tend to put myself in the middle and then put my Prezi presentation over. As you will notice, this was a much simpler process. We didn't have to share a screen. We didn't have to do any type of switching. The main thing, though, again, is that I did forget to mention, I will mention it now, is that you do have to have your Prezi video camera selected. And so how we do that on Google Meet is a little different than Skype. You're still going to go to these three buttons here where it says more options. You will go into settings and then video. So you have audio, video, host controls. If you go to video, you can set your camera as Prezi Video Virtual Camera. So if you notice, this will always be the rule no matter what presentation software you're using, whether it be Skype, Meet, or Zoom, you will always need to make sure that your camera is set to Prezi Video Virtual Camera, not whatever built-in camera you already have. So that will be something we'll do each time. All right, we'll take questions back in the regular presentation. See you there. Okay, everyone. Any questions about that one? That one, hopefully you could see was a lot easier. But if you do have any questions, we can take them now.
Quentin, I
I
have a
do have
question. I'm sorry.
Okay. Oh no,
no.
that's fine.
Sue, I'm
Let's
sorry.
I'll start with Deborah and then Sue
Okay.
will get right to you.
I see your phone on the screen, and I'm I'm not sure why I'm seeing your phone on the screen. Like if you're filming yourself, how is it still showing your phone?
Okay. So, as many of you know, last week was supposed to be this webinar, and I unfortunately had to cancel because of there were so many technical difficulties. Essentially, the reason why you're seeing all of this is because for these videos that I'm having to show on YouTube, I was unable to do an actual screen recording. So, on your laptop, usually you have an option to do a screen recording where I can just record whatever's happening on my screen. That's what I used for some of the demos. But unfortunately, with Prezi, whenever I would go to share my Prezi presentation in whatever software I was trying to do a demo of, it would cut off my screen recording. And so the only workaround I could figure out was to record a video with my phone of me doing it. And so that's why you can see Prezi recording me recording myself. Recording. All right. So, Sue, your question.
The only question I had was during the teaching, so the camera you're saying is flipped. So the students are seeing the actual, correct side of the presentation. But as the teacher, will I always be looking at the flipped side?
So,
So I might find that a little confusing.
yeah. So there is a an add-on that you can do into your Chrome to flip your video automatically within Google
Oh,
Meet, but I don't have that add-on.
okay.
And so that's why I'm gonna go ahead and for this purpose, I'm gonna go ahead and just share my whole screen with you really quickly, so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Okay. So if we are looking at this, now you guys can see yourselves and what it looks like for me. This actually looks okay because I'm showing a video. But if I went to, let's say, let me get out of here. Okay, so do you see how on this screen it looks flipped? But you all don't see this as flipped. You all see this normal. You can read this normally, but for me, it's flipped. That's why
Um,
with Google Meet, I just size my Prezi presentation to be the same size as this. And now I can see myself and
oh,
read it the real way. And
okay.
so that's why I do that very important step. So now, as you can see, I can see all of you and I can see my presentation the correct way. I can
Okay.
do both.
Very good. Thank you.
Yep, you're very welcome. Good question.
I guess I have another question. So if you've never presented, but you want to kind of do a practice, what you'll just be seeing your own screen to kind of get an idea of you don't share the meeting with anyone. You just kind of go about the meeting by yourself.
So actually, you can go about the meeting by yourself, but yeah, it is a little bit difficult to see exactly how it's going to look and what it looks like. And so what I did, my partner, that's you're going to see his face a lot, because he's the other person that I'm in the call with. Is from his laptop, and so that's how I had to do it. I just asked, him, okay, like I'm gonna do some recording. Can I use your computer? And I just did it with myself. You can also do it with your phone. So if you use your phone and like if you do have two email accounts or something, you can sign in as someone else, like your other email account, and then you can see what it looks like on your phone versus what it looks like on the computer. That's another way that you can test it yourself. But yeah, definitely having a friend that you can say, hey, do you mind just looking at this and telling me if this looks right, is definitely very helpful. All right. Jan, I see that you raised your hand. So feel free. What's your question?
Yes, sir. I'm wondering if you're going to talk about integrating a YouTube video that comes later, and this is specifically just the Prezi piece?
Oh, that comes later. I've got that too for you, Jan. So you just stick in there. It's coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, here we go. So we've learned Google Meet. And now we will do a quick one with Zoom. So Zoom. Oh, Vanessa, you have a question. Go right ahead. Oh, Vanessa, did you have a question or did you raise your hand on accident there?
No, my question is not really a question. You have a question in your comment section, so I think the person wasn't able to speak. I just wanted
Oh,
to be like, hey, check that out.
oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for pointing that out. And Carla, I am so sorry that I did not see that come through. Okay, so if your Prezi presentation had sound, would you have to change anything in the audio settings of Google Meet or Zoom? The answer is no. You would not, because for Zoom and Google Meet, it will use the audio of whatever you are presenting. And so for Google Meet and Zoom specifically, you would not have to change anything. Now, when we get to the YouTube and audio file portion of our webinar, you will see that in Skype, you would have to change some audio settings because Skype is always the problem child of our presentation software. And so you would have to change some audio settings if you were using Skype. But to answer your question, no, in Google Meet or in Zoom, you would not have to change any audio settings. Okay, and one more question here. How are you controlling the presentation from the Prezi window or Google Meet Skype? From the Prezi window. So all of the controls are going to be in your Prezi window. And so let me just go ahead and share my screen one more time because I think that's the easiest way to demonstrate this. So this is what it looks like if I don't have Prezi up and on my screen. This is what it looks like. So as you can see, the presentation is flipped, but it looks normal for you. But if I click on my Prezi, here's my Prezi, and this is how I'm actually, when I'm talking to you all, this is what it looks like for me. I'll show you. So when I'm presenting and just talking and going through the webinar, this is what it looks like for me. So you all are on the side, my presentation is front and center, and then I control it just by using the Prezi. This is my Prezi window. I use that, and I just use these arrows to go to each step. And so that's how I'm controlling it. I'm not doing anything in Google Meet. Google Meet is just showing the presentation, but all of my controls are in Prezi video. All right. Okay. So moving on now to the integration with Zoom. I say that this is a piece of the same cake because it's also just as easy as Google Meet for the most part. So still going to have to adjust those camera settings, making sure that your Prezi camera is on. Open your Prezi video and upload your presentation. And again, just like with Google Meet, there is no screen sharing required. Meeting participants will automatically see you with your Prezi presentation overlaid. And so we will go to that one. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, everyone, we're going to begin our final demonstration of how to integrate Prezi, and this time we'll be using Zoom. So Zoom is going to function a lot like Google Meet functioned as far as integration goes. It's very easy and there's not much that we need to do. So to start off, Zoom, I want to show you how to adjust the camera settings. That's always the first thing we need to do. In order to use any Prezi presentation, what's our number one rule? We have to make sure our camera settings are appropriate. In Zoom, it's a little bit different because you have to kind of go to this stop video button, but there's a little arrow here that you can click and then you can choose the Prezi video virtual camera. Again, I have two options, but I'll always choose Prezi video virtual camera. Once you make sure you're set there, you are good to go as far as the settings that you need. So the rest you've seen before. We'll of course go into our Prezi video. We will import from Prezi, select our presentation, import selected, And you will now see yourself with your Prezi presentation there. Now, again, if I show you this, it's going to still look like it's backwards. Not to worry, it will not actually be backwards. The cool thing that I think about Zoom and what is the best is that I can kind of resize my Zoom window, and I can actually make my Prezi window pretty small because I'm only going to really just control my presentation. And the cool thing about Zoom is that without having to share your screen, without having to do anything, if you had multiple people, you could just change this to a large grid or a gallery view like I already have, and you would be able to see all of your students and your presentation, and you'd still have enough room to control your presentation on your actual Prezi video. So I think that Zoom is probably, when it comes to integration, one of the best when it comes to not really having to worry about sizing or moving your video into a certain location. You can really kind of just work with what the Zoom settings already have for you. So again, we'll take questions back in our webinar. See you there. All right, back again. Any questions about that last one, about integrating Zoom? Very, very similar to integrating with Google Meet, just where you adjust that camera setting is a little bit different in Zoom, but they are very similar. Any questions there? This time I am checking the in-call messages to make sure no one's typing a message to me there. Okay, it looks like we are good to go on questions for this portion. So let's move on. All right. So Prezi, we are now done with those. So we've gone through Prezi with Skype, Google Meet, and Zoom. Now let's move on to Google Slides or PowerPoint. I have grouped. Oh, it looks like Carla may have a quick question here. Go ahead, Carla.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. It's kind of just an overall question. When you're sharing your Prezi presentation, it cuts off on my screen sometimes to where I can't read it unless I open the chat bar. Is that normal for students to experience?
Open the chat bar. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So sometimes like what the words on my presentation cut off
Yes.
unless you open the chat bar.
Yes, it doesn't open to the full screen even when I have you pinned. So I'm not sure if that's a problem anyone else is experiencing.
Oh, you know what? Honestly, that is a question that I would have to look into. Jan says yes, the same. So it does seem like it is something that is happening. But what I find interesting is that if you open the chat bar, which like kind of takes up some of your screen, then you can see the full picture.
Yes,
Okay, so
because it pushes all of the student images to the bottom of the screen, and then it lets your screen become enlarged.
interesting. Okay. Okay, this is really good information to know. That's very, very good information to know. Now, what I'm wondering if now, I'm going to increase the size of because similar to Skype, how I said windows matter and the size of your window matters, I'm going to make my Prezi presentation nice and big now. And I want to see if that has an effect going forward. So kind of monitor it and see if going forward, some of the words are still cut off, because now I've essentially made my Prezi video the entire screen that I have. I can't see you guys anymore. And so we'll roll with that and see if that gives a better experience. And if it does, then we've just figured out another workaround that I'll have to add to this video.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your question. Okay, so Google Slides and PowerPoint, how to integrate those into your presentations. coming from a Prezi perspective, this is going to be a piece of cake. It's really easy to do this. And I group Google Slides and PowerPoint in the same thing because they are essentially the same. Google Slides is just the Google version of PowerPoint. A lot of people use Google Slides now because if you don't have a Microsoft account or you don't work for a company that pays for your license to have PowerPoint, then Google Slides is the free way to PowerPoint. So I group them the same because they're going to work the same with all of your presentation software. All right. As always, Skype is the most difficult, so we will start there and integrate. So when we're integrating a Google Slides or a PowerPoint presentation, we're going to be using an internet browser. So the first thing we're going to do is open up an internet browser and either open up the link to your Google Slide, or if you have a PowerPoint presentation, you could that could also just be saved on your desktop. And so you'll want to just open that as, just open your presentation on your desktop. But with Slides, definitely you're going to open it in a browser. And so you'll do that first. Next, in Skype, you're going to share your screen, and you're going to share your presentation by sharing your screen. Skype only has two options for screen sharing. You can either share your entire screen, which will give you everything on your screen, or you can share just a window. For the purposes of sharing a presentation like a slides, you are going to use just the window. This will work too if you have a PowerPoint that you've opened on your desktop because maybe you have it saved. It's not online. You just opened it on your desktop. Sharing a window will also work in that instance too if you're using PowerPoint. And so when you go to share, you'll select the window option. And of course, you will select the window where your presentation is open. With Skype, similar to Prezi, your screen sizing or the window sizing is important. The smaller the window, the smaller the view, the bigger the window, the bigger the view. And so for presentations like a slides or a PowerPoint, you are going to want to enter presentation mode. And for anyone who has used Slides or PowerPoint, you know what this does. It makes your slide presentation take up your entire screen so you can see nothing else. So one of the biggest drawbacks to using Skype and using a Slides or a PowerPoint presentation is that you will not be able to see your students. Okay, and so we will go ahead and demo this. It's another one that's going to come directly from YouTube, so I will share that. Now that we have learned how to integrate Prezi with our platforms, which will be the most difficult thing we go through today, we're going to start learning now how to integrate Google Slides or PowerPoint into your different platforms. So, as always, we will start with the most difficult, which will be Skype. For Skype, really, there's only two things that you're going to worry about, and that is sharing your screen. Now, we know from our Prezi presentations that for sharing a screen in Skype, we have two options. We can either share our entire desktop, or we can choose just to share a window. So I'm going to choose to only share the window of the presentation that I want to present. So that is step one. Share the window of the presentation you'd like to present. You will know that your presentation is being shared because it will be outlined in red. Okay? So the next thing that's very important when it comes to Skype is that the size of your window actually does matter. The larger your window is on your computer, the larger that window will appear to your audience and classmates. Vice versa, the smaller your window is, the smaller that window will appear to your audience and classmates. So the best thing that you can do when presenting either a Google Slides or a PowerPoint is actually to go into presentation mode. Now, for most of us who have used these presentation softwares before, we know that presentation mode takes over your entire screen. And so that is one of the major drawbacks about using Skype with a slides presentation or a PowerPoint, because now I've lost the ability to see my students. While they can still hear me, I can still hear them, I can still ask questions, they can still respond, but I've lost that ability to see and truly interact with them. And so that is one of the biggest downfalls of using a slides or a PowerPoint within Skype. All right, we will go back to our regular presentation for any questions. All right. Any questions there about how we integrated our slides or PowerPoint? Pretty simple when coming from Prezi, at least in my opinion, I think. You just really need to share. The main thing to remember with Skype, again, is that the window size does matter. And so if you're trying to make your presentation window very small, it's going to look really small to who you're presenting to. So it's always best to be in presentation mode, which I know takes away the ability to see your students. But if you get really snazzy with it, you can kind of swap back and forth really quick if you need to see. Or one tip that I have is that, especially if I know I'm going to be asking questions during the presentation, I'll write down the names of students who I know are in my class, and I'll have them written down so that I don't have to go back to class. I can just call out their names from the presentation and ask them questions that way. That's one way that you can save yourself when you can't see your students anymore, is just to have their names of who's in class written down. Or in another situation, kind of like when we're teaching our large classes and we're doing like a co-teaching environment, typically your co-teacher or Luke will kind of walk around the classroom and have students answer your questions. So it's not completely necessary that you see them, but it is nice to be able to see their reactions, to see, because you can tell a lot if they're understanding the information by seeing their faces. So definitely one of the downsides of presenting that way. Okay, so now we will move on. If there are no questions, I'll pause just for a second in case there was a question.
Actually, I'm thinking of one.
Okay. Yep.
Is there a way around losing the ability to see your students if you have two laptops set up? I mean, is that a way around so that you can have a presentation on one computer and then see the students on another? Is that easily done or possible?
So I do believe that yes. The answer would be yes. That would be one way that you could do it. If you have two computers, or even if you have two monitors, you can get around this. Because if you have two monitors or two computers, then you can move your presentation to one monitor or computer, have it full screen, and then so that's going to give them the full screen experience. And then on your other screen, you're going to have your actual Skype or whatever open, and so then you'll be able to fully see it there. So these workarounds and everything that I'm talking about are for people who only have one laptop or a single screen. Definitely, if you have two screens or you have access to two laptops, you could work around that way and not lose the ability to see your students if you can open it on two devices.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
No worries. All right. So now we will do, did we just do this one? We were in Skype before, so now we will go to Google Meet. Okay, I'm back on track. I lost where I was for a second. So we are on integration with Google Meet. So again, the first steps are going to be the same. You're either going to open that slide presentation in a browser, or you can open your PowerPoint. Either way, that's going to be your first step. Now, with Meet, the cool thing is that Meet not only allows you to share your full screen or a window, it allows you to share an individual tab. And so this is a game changer when it comes to Google Meet, especially as a teacher, because I can display whatever tab I want to display. And I can also be working in another tab, like say I'm preparing questions for after this video, or I need to pull up, I thought of something really quick and I want to find a different resource online. I can be doing all of that, and my students are only seeing the tab that I want them to see. So that's a very cool thing about Google Meet, is that you can share an individual tab, not just an entire window. All right. And so you will share the tab where you've opened your presentation. And when sharing a tab, you go into and I'm sorry, the other good thing about sharing a tab is that when you go into presentation mode, it doesn't actually take up like your full screen. It just takes up like the full tab screen. So it's almost like getting a full screen experience, but not having to actually have it take over your entire screen. So that's another cool thing about using Google Meet when you're using a slide or a PowerPoint presentation. Now, however, sharing an entire window could actually be best for being able to see your students and the presentation at the same time. So I am going to, this is a time where the video is actually embedded in the presentation, so you won't have to change up or anything. But there was a gentleman who actually has a very good video on how you can do a presentation with Google Meets and still see your students. And so I found that he explained it so well that I just borrowed his YouTube video. And so we'll take a look at what he has to say. And that's why I mentioned that sometimes sharing a full window may actually be the better way to be able to also see your students. So we'll take a look at this video.
This video, I'm going to show you how to present your screen and be able to see the students or participants in a Google Meet, even if you only have one screen. Here we go. First things first, let's start with some basic vocabulary. You need to know the difference between a window and a tab. This whole thing, this whole browser that we have here, this is our window. This is our Google Chrome window. We'll know because we have that big X that's right there. And if I click on that X, I'm going to exit out of the entire Meet. That's the window. These little things right here are tabs. So that's a tab. I'll open a new one by clicking on that plus sign. And that's a new tab by clicking on the plus sign there. So these are tabs, and the whole browser is a window. Okay? Major difference between a tab and a window. That's the first thing you need to understand in order to do this. Since you only have one monitor or one computer, in order to present content and see your students, we'll do this by clicking in the upper right-hand corner, the little three dots that are there. We'll click on it and we'll see a few different options. One is to open a new tab. The second one is to open a new window. And then the third is to open a new incognito window. The one that we want to start with is opening a new window. When I open this new window, I'll then be able to see that I have a new window with nothing in it. This is where I will then put my content. I've pulled up a presentation that I want to share with my students in a new window. Right now, I can't see the Google Meet, I can only see my presentation. To move the presentation, I can put it side by side with the meet by clicking at the top, grabbing the bar, and moving it over to the left side, and we'll see this whole little shadow that's here. It's going to then snap in place for me. So if I let it go, it has snapped in place, and it will also now allow me to select another window that I want to place on the side of this window. So I'll select the Google Meet where my students. Don't worry if you can't get it to snap into place like that very neatly. All you need to do is to make sure that you have the content that you want to share in one window and the Google Meet that you are presenting in with your students in another window. So here I am with my content on the left in one window, and here I am here with my class in the other window. Now I'm ready to present to my class. I'll go by clicking down on the Present Now button right here. When I click on it, it's going to give me three different options. The first one is going to be my entire screen, but that's not the one that I want to do. If I present my entire screen, they will be able to see both of these windows at the same time, and they will also see anything else that's on my desktop. I only want them to see that window. So what I'll do is present one window, present a window. When I click on presenting a window, it will then ask me which of the windows I want to share. Which one am I going to share? I'm glad you asked. You guessed it, it's the one that has my presentation or the content that I want to share. So I'll click on the one that has my presentation in it and click the share button. I'll know that it's sharing by down at the bottom, and it's going to change right here on the screen. And so it shows that I am presenting to everyone right now. And here are all of my students right there. It shows right here below where I am on the side. This is the content that I am sharing. This is my presentation. I can see the students here, and the content is over here. But if we take a look at it, right down here, we'll see that it is a student view, and they can only see what I have presented there in the screen. I can go ahead and click on the present button, but when I clicked on present, it went to full screen mode and I can't see my students here. So I can easily exit out of full screen mode. And now the presentation has only filled the browser window that I'm sharing to students. So it's in full screen for my students, but I can still see them on this one screen. Let's take a look at it from a student perspective.
Okay. So that is where I will pause that demo for now, instead of looking at it from a student perspective, especially for timing's sake. Any questions from anyone on that portion? So I will tell you, the snapping it in place, I'm not sure what type of computer he has, but for my Mac that I have, the snapping in place doesn't really work to make it snap half and half very neatly. When I used to have a PC, I was able to do that really easily. There was a function that you could use to automatically make things half and half. So maybe he has a PC. But you can still size your screens like he did, where you just you manually size them half and half so that you can see your students and do that. And every other instruction that he gave will work to make your presentation the most visible to your students. All right, any questions on that one? I also have a question just really quickly. How has it been viewing the presentation? Have you been able to see everything now that my screen, my Prezi video window is larger, or is the same issue still happening?
It's the same issue.
Okay, well then I'm going to resize mine because it's easier for me to see you, and I like seeing you and talking. So I'll resize it since it didn't help. And then I'll have to figure that out. That's something that's very interesting that I did not know until you brought it up. So thank you for that. I do see that Jan raised her hand. Jan, want to go ahead?
I was just asking if we could have the link to that YouTube video you just shared.
Yes, I can find that for you. And actually, I think it's already in the supplemental videos that I will share later. Like I said, probably tomorrow once this actually processes the webinar video, I'll send all the videos at one time.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, no worries. Okay. For Zoom, essentially, as you'll notice, probably it's going to be the exact same as mostly as what you just learned on Google Meet. For Zoom, you'll share your screen just like Skype. It only has two options: to share the entire screen or to just share a window. So you're going to share the window of your presentation. Um, and in Zoom, window sizing is important. If the window is small on your screen, it will also appear small to your audience. And so it's best to also go into presentation mode. While this was a major drawback for Skype and Meet, since you could no longer see your students, Zoom will allow you to present while you're still seeing the participants in the meeting. So it's kind of a double side where it does matter how big your screen is. You want it to be as large as possible and be in that presentation mode. But with Zoom, you'll see in the demo, you'll still be able to see your students and use Zoom. So we will go ahead and watch this. Meeting where I will show you the demonstration of how to integrate a Google slide or PowerPoint into Zoom. This one is probably one of the easiest. It's going to be very similar to what you just saw when integrating into Google Meet. The only difference is that Zoom allows you to present full screen and still see your audience. So let's begin. I already have a Zoom meeting open here, as you can see. And on my other tabs, I have a presentation. Now, Zoom, sort of like Skype, will not allow you to share only a tab, only a full window, as was explained in the previous video. So I'm just going to pull this out into its own window. I want it to be separate from everything else. Okay? So once I have that going and I have my presentation separate, I can go directly to share screen. And once I'm here, I have a lot of different options. I can do a whiteboard, I can do my full desktop, or any window that I have open. But I'm of course going to select the window of my presentation and double click. Once I've double clicked, you can see now that I have this option here that says you are sharing your screen and a bunch of options. That's how I know that I am sharing this. Now, the cool thing is that you can go ahead and hit the present button, which is going to give your viewers the entire presentation. But look what's so cool about Zoom. Even though I'm presenting on my full screen now, I can still see the attendees in the meeting. And of course, for demonstration purposes, I only have one attendee. But if I had more, I could turn this to a gallery view and see all of my attendees and still be presenting full screen. So that is one of the definite advantages of doing and integrating a Google slide or a PowerPoint into Zoom. All right, we will end here and take any questions in the presentation. All right, so any questions about that demo. Again, very similar to Google Meet, and just a matter of sharing your screen, really, or sharing your window, I should say. Any questions there? All right. Well, we will keep moving because I know that someone was very excited about YouTube. So YouTube and audio files and how you share those. Essentially, I'm going to go through this one a little bit quicker, only because it's essentially the same as what we've done in before. Your YouTube and your audio files, you're going to want to, it's essentially the same process in Google Slides or a Google or a PowerPoint presentation, where you're going to want to open your YouTube in your browser. You're going to want to open your audio file and have it open and ready. Usually your audio files are going to be something that you find online as well. So you'll want to open those in a browser, similar to what you did for a slides or a PowerPoint. Once you have it open, you're just going to share that window or that tab. If you're in Google Meet, you could share the tab, but for Zoom and Skype, you're going to share the window of your YouTube video or audio file. And now here is the big one, the always remember. So Skype, our problem child when it comes to presenting. If you are using Skype and you want to share a video or an audio file, your audience will not be able to hear the audio unless you unplug your headset or you disconnect your earbuds. So if you're using some type of earbuds that are Bluetooth, unless you disconnect them or change the audio settings to your computer audio, your audience will not be able to hear your YouTube video or your audio file in Skype. It's this weird thing where basically Skype, when it's sharing your audio or broadcasting your audio, it's actually broadcasting the computer speaker audio. And so if it's in a headset, it doesn't pick that up. It doesn't pick that up to broadcast it. So that's why you have to unplug yourself or change your audio settings in Skype to be your computer audio, not your external audio. And so if you have a headset that plugs in, the easiest thing to do is just unplug yourself and you'll be good to go. Now, the other thing to think about with Skype is that you need to change your noise cancellation settings. So Skype has in their audio settings some noise cancellation, which is very useful, but it's not useful when you're trying to show a YouTube or audio file that you need your students to hear. So this is going to be one that I will share directly from YouTube. So you might need to repin me, but here we go. Mentioning the fact that you need to unplug your headset or your earbuds, disconnect them before playing a YouTube video or audio file on Skype. I just wanted to make sure everyone was very clear about what settings you should change. So if I know that when I'm having a class or a presentation that there are videos involved and I'm using Skype, the one thing I will do is go into settings, and you're still going to use the audio and video settings, but if you scroll down, you will see this option for noise cancellation. Typically, for most classes, I always keep this on high. If I don't plan on showing a video, then I will always have this on high because that's going to help with some of the external noise that you may have that may happen in your home or in your neighborhood. But if you're showing a video, you need to set this to low. it needs to be on low because essentially Skype is using your computer audio to just to send that audio to your audience. So when the YouTube video or the audio file is playing, Skype is actually listening to your computer speakers and broadcasting that to your audience. And so if you have noise cancellation on high, Skype thinks that what it's hearing should be canceled and it will make it very difficult for your audience to hear. So if you know you're going to show videos, always go into your Skype settings and change noise cancellation to low. Okay, so that is our quick demonstration on how to change those noise cancellation settings. Are there any questions about that or why we do it or why it's important? Any questions on that piece of it? All right. So now just one last YouTube tip, and many of you probably already know this, but especially for ESL classes, YouTube does allow you to add subtitles, and it also allows you to slow down the playback speed if you have lower level learners. So definitely, if you are presenting or you are needing to show a video to a lower level language learner, YouTube does have the ability to go ahead and slow that down or add subtitles to it. So I can actually do a very quick demonstration of that if anyone would like to anyone would like to see that. Really quick, I'll just share my tab here. And so this was a game that I did with the class on YouTube. And so how you do that is if you just go here to the settings, you can adjust the playback speed. So if it's normal, that's like the normal speed that it is, but then you can slow it down to 0.75, to half speed, to quarter speed. So you can really slow things down for your learners. And then you can always add the subtitles by just hitting closed caption and it will add the subtitles for you there. So that's just a quick demonstration of where you find those functions in YouTube. All right. So now we will move on to just a few pros and cons. So now that we've been through how to integrate all of these different platforms and which ones, the three major ones that we've been using, Skype, Google Meet, and Zoom, I just wanted to tell you just kind of an overview of how I see some of the pros and cons of each one. And like I said, your opinions may differ a little, but these are some of the pros and cons that I see. So for Skype, so some of the pros are that Skype allows you to record your sessions. It allows everyone to do this. You don't have to have a paid account. So that's definitely a good one. For us in working with MCC, if you're tutoring or co-teaching, it's a requirement that you record your sessions. And so Skype allows you to do that very easily. The other thing is that for Skype, chats stay open very easily. They stay open forever until you close them or delete them. And so students can always easily go back and reference things that were either said in the chat or reference links that you sent in the chat or reference documents that you sent in the chat. The chats remain open even after you end your call. That is not the case with like a Google Meet where once we end the call, the chat goes away. Now, some of the cons to using Skype is that it's the hardest to integrate with other software. Just by this demonstration, you saw there's always a lot of workarounds to making Skype work. Even with showing a simple YouTube video, I have to unplug my headset. Skype is just the hardest to use with other things. Also, Skype doesn't have a lot of other teaching features such as whiteboards. I love whiteboarding. I think it's a collaborative way that you can show how things work and then also have your students participate. Zoom and Google Meets have whiteboarding capabilities, whereas Skype does not. So that's another con, in my opinion. All right, Google Meet. So, some pros about Google Meet is just the ability to share just a tab. Like I said, that has been so useful for me as a teacher to be able to be showing my students one tab while I'm preparing something on a different tab. Yes, a way that you can work around this is to just separate everything out into a different window, but that becomes very cumbersome when you're trying to jump around and figure out where your windows are. Windows hide other windows. And so sometimes that can become difficult opening several different windows and trying to jump around when you can just have all of the tabs open on a single window and just jump from tab to tab. So I really like that. Google Meet also easily integrates with all of the other software that we've looked at, especially obviously Google products, which so many of us use now. And it also has that whiteboarding capability, or Jamboard, I think is what it's called on Google. And so I really like that feature as well. The cons to Google Meet, which we will see if I click this right. The cons to Google Meet are that you can only record sessions if you have a paid account. So there are like the Google Workplace. You can pay to have the actual Google Workplace, and that's the only way that you can actually record a session. So for those of you who are tutoring or doing co-teaching with My Culture Connect, you unfortunately won't be able to use Google Meet because you can't record your sessions unless you've paid for the paid version. Also, users need a Gmail account for easiest access. You can send invites to non-Google or to non-Gmail users. You can send out invites to them, but it's just much easier access with a Gmail account. And so that's kind of a con, in my opinion. And then the biggest one of all is that it disappears. The chats disappear after each call. Now, as the person who's leading the call, I will get a transcript of the chat, but then I would then have to email that out to everyone or send it out to everyone. And so that's a little bit more difficult. And so I find that that's a con with Google Meet. Now with Zoom, some of the pros are its popularity. I think that during the pandemic and COVID-19, everybody has used Zoom by now. So most people are very comfortable with Zoom. They know how to use it. They know how to open it. They know how to dial in if they can't use a computer. Zoom has just become the most popular. It also easily integrates with presentation software. So things like Google products, and so it's very easily integratable. And then also it has a whiteboard. And so even on the free version of Zoom, you can do whiteboarding with your students. Now, the con with Zoom that many of you may know, Zoom has a 40-minute time limit on the free version if you have 3 or more people in the call. So if you were in a one-on-one tutoring session where it was just you and one other person, you could stay on that call for hours and it would not cut you off. But if it was you and 2 other people or you and more than 2 other people, on the free version, it will cut you off at 40 minutes, and then you will have to restart another call to finish your class. So it only is unlimited if you are only doing one-on-one. So for those of you who are tutoring one-on-one, Zoom is an option because it does allow you to record your sessions. But if you are tutoring more than one student or there's more than 3 video feeds coming in, you will only get 40 minutes on the time limit. Also, due to some security issues early on with Zoom, some organization, like for instance, Taiwan's Ministry of Education, will not allow us to use Zoom in an educational capacity. And so if we are like doing a class or co-teaching at a school in Taiwan, we are not allowed to use Zoom because of the security issues. Now, if you're doing one-on-one tutoring, that's different. You could use it because that's not going to the school or broadcasting in the school. But because of some of the security issues early on with Zoom during the pandemic, some places have limited the usage of Zoom. And so that's just a very quick rundown of some of the pros and cons that I've noticed with using the different ones. All right. And so I know we don't have much time left until our 2:30 Eastern cutoff, but I do want to open it up to any final questions. This can be related to any of the integrations into teaching, just any general questions that you have. I've also listed our Facebook, LinkedIn, and also my email address here. So if you haven't connected with us on Facebook or LinkedIn, I do send out like our weekly programming schedule, interesting articles, things like that will be posted on those social media platforms. And of course, you can always email me any questions or send me a message on Skype if you have questions. But I wanted to leave my email address here as a way, a means of contact. So I will leave it open now to anyone who may have questions. I know it was a lot of information today, so I really appreciate everyone sticking in there and taking an hour and a half of your Saturday afternoon to go through this with me. I really appreciate that. So, any questions? Okay. Well, as you know, please go ahead if you did not. If you want instant access to the YouTube of how to use Prezi, go ahead and copy that link out of the chat now before we end the call. Like I said, please check back in the Skype chat. That is where I will post a video of this webinar, as well as all of the supplemental videos that we watched that weren't embedded in this video as well. So you will get access to all of those later on in the Skype chat. I want to just say thank you so much to My Culture Connect for sponsoring this webinar. And thank you all so much for being here on this Saturday afternoon. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see everyone later.
Thank you, Quentin.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Thank you.